Hey everybody, once again my name's Chris Tharp, and we're jumping back on part 2 of world building in Unity. Quick couple things up front, I had a bit of an oopsie. I accidentally deleted the previous file that we were working with, and noticed that, the HD render pipeline is now officially out of preview, and we probably should have made it with that, but I'm not familiar enough with that yet. So I ran into a weird conundrum. Do you finish the part 2? Do you scrap it and start over with the HD render pipeline? And I figured the answer is do both. So for now, we're going to continue on with where we left off. I'm going to do this a little bit different because I went ahead last night and just playing around, I essentially tried to get back to where we were with a little bit of water, some mountains, some textures on our environment, and trees, and a sun. I think that's where we were when we left off. I got to that point and was having such a good time, I just kept on with the process and forgot to record it. So, great start. Anyway, since I've already done the work, we're just going to go back and look at what we did to be able to get to this point from where we were before. So essentially just adding in some of the post-processing effects, obviously bringing in 3D objects from Blender, fully textured, placing them, lighting them, and I think that's all I did with this actually. I think I added in some particle effects, just little, spice it up visual stuff. Yeah, so I got lily pads, boards, made a little kind of deck thing. Mushrooms, which aren't perfectly textured, but what can you do? And, okay, yeah, got our clouds, and then our animation and our camera. That's pretty much what we're going to cover in this second part. So, if you're not at least at the point of having a basic terrain, a basic sky, and some trees and grass and whatnot, then jump back and see my previous video, part 1. If you're all caught up, then we're going to look at how we got here. So, let me see here. Go to the main camera. I think the first important thing to look at is the post-processing stack, which we actually downloaded in the last video, but if you didn't, then you're going to want to just go up to Window, Package Manager, and it's going to be in here. They haven't loaded in, but it'll be in here. Just post-processing stack. Just click that and hit import. And then what you're going to be able to do at that point is on your camera object, scroll all the way down to the bottom, click add component, go to rendering, and you'll have some new options here with post-processing debug, post-processing layer, and post-processing volume. All you need to do is add a layer and add a volume, and you're going to get some options pop up. I understand it's a little confusing because I've already done it. Okay, important thing here. Oh, sorry. Where's that post-processing? Yeah, okay, important thing here. This is going to be empty for you, the profile for the post-processing volume. All you're going to need to do is, as long as it's attached to your camera, just click new and it will build a new profile for you, which then you can fill out with your different effects. If it doesn't auto fill it in, then it will toss it into your assets and it'll look like this. You can just drag it right over and drop it in. Another thing to mention is this right here, the layer everything. It pops up a warning that it's not the best thing to do for optimization. Just keep that in mind. For the purposes of this, it's just quick and easy. It's not a big deal. But if you were making a whole game or even something a little more complex, then you would want to put that layer, you would want to create a separate layer for that. Okay. So for this particular project, just for funsies, making it look pretty, I added Ambient Occlusion. Also, to add these, you just scroll down here and hit Add Effect, Unity, and then you have the different ones. So I've added Bloom, Color Grading, Depth of Field, and Ambient Occlusion. I could probably do a couple more, but it looks pretty awesome as is. I'm happy with it. If you're not familiar with what each of these do, like, for the most part, the Ambient Occlusion affects your lighting. So it gives you sort of like detailed contact shadows and whatnot. I mean, I would just say play with them. The bloom also affects your lighting and how intense that registers to the camera. Depth of field, self-explanatory. It's you essentially can have your camera focus on a particular position. That's what's given us this nice kind of blurry effect right here on the foreground while the background is still nice and crisp. Color grading, that's just changing up the whole tone. I actually haven't done a lot of messing with that, but after messing with it for this, I'm going to use it all the time. It's fantastic, and really this whole scene didn't have this nice red tone to it. You can see the effect that the color grading has to be able to change the feel of everything, and it's pretty awesome. Just undo that because I liked it how I had it. Alright, I think that pretty much covers the post-processing stuff. Like I said, you can use the other effects. You don't have to use all these effects, but just selecting them and then playing with them, we can actually turn them on and off. So you see without the bloom there, the sun is just a nice crisp circle. With the bloom, we get a little bit of that light bleeding. It looks like it's scattering through the atmosphere. But just play with the effects. Hopefully you have a good time with it. Alright, next thing to look at is going to be the clouds. So I'm not sure how well you could see them. And I never got them to the point where they were exactly how I wanted them. See, we have some up here. But they're essentially just based off of a particle system using a cloud texture. I have an empty object that emits random amounts, and then I have them interacting with the lighting, so you get that really awesome the shadows of the clouds kind of brushing over the terrain. And it doesn't always work out perfect. As a matter of fact, if we sit here long enough, you'll see one of the clouds will come and hit the camera right in the face, and it looks bad. So there's some tweaking to be done there. But for the most part, it's doing its job, and I'll just go and show you the setup for that. Let me go down here, jump back to our scene. I think this is it. Yep. Alright, so you can see here, all we have is an empty game object, and then I've attached a particle system here, and just played around with the settings. The biggest things that affect the way this looks, or at least the areas where it looks good, are in the render settings, where we have cast shadows set to on and receive shadows. I don't know why that's grayed out like that. Might be giving me sass, but that's okay. And then let me see here. Gonna hit Control-6 to bring up our animation tab and restart this. Come down here and hit spacebar. That actually shows us the animation for our empty game object. So it literally just jumps back and forth, and the clouds or particles you can see here are just set up to jump out between random intervals to give it a little bit of variance. Don't worry about the giant puff there. That's not how it normally looks. It's because it's trying to run its particle simulation along with the animation of the parent object at the same time, so it looks a little funny. Let's see, stop that, and stop that. And if you don't remember from the last, the Getting to Know You Unity video that I did cover the basics of keyframe animation, and that's all I used for this. So if you hit Control-6, you'll get this window pop up, and or if you go up to Window, down to Animation, and select Animation, it'll pop up, and all you do is hit this little record button here. You grab your object and wiggle it around a little bit until you get a little keyframe marker that pops up, and then you move your timeline to whatever position you want and move your object to whatever position you want. It is very easy to use, and it's super handy for stuff like this. For very basic animations, it's great. Alright, I do want to point out the texture that I use for the clouds, or the material that I use for the clouds. Here we go. So it is very basic. It is literally just a cloud cutout, and the image that I use, here we go, is one just built right into the standard assets. So there's a couple of them that you can get some decent results with. Obviously they're not you know, amazing clouds, but they're getting the job done for what we're trying to do here. And that material is pretty easy to set up. If you're not familiar with setting up materials, we're going to go over that here in just a sec, because we need to talk about getting our 3D objects from Blender into Unity and making them look fancy. We're doing our best anyway. So I've got my mushrooms here, and then I've also got lily pads and the little wooden boards here that I have built out. We'll jump over, oh, let's see. Here we go. Alright, we're jumping over into Blender, and we're just going to do a quick mock-up of one of those objects just to help us understand what's going on here. So I'm going to take this cube and delete it, and we're going to do the easiest one. We'll just recreate the lily pad. The general shape for that is going to be a cylinder, and I'm going to go and actually find the image that I have. There we go, pad PNG, and drop that into Blender, so we're able to use it as a reference. So now we have our image and we have our 3D object. We just got to combine the two. So I'm going to center it right about there, and then I'm going to scale our cylinder to match. Sorry if I'm skipping over some things. S to scale, G to grab, R to rotate. Going to hit Z and go to wireframe so we can really see what's going on, and scale it down a little bit more. Now this image, being a PNG, has the built-in alpha already, so it's not a big deal to have a little bit of this hanging over right here. Oh. That's not a big deal because it'll cut it out. But this, it might be a little bit much right there. So to fix that, we're just going to hit Tab, and now we're in edit mode. I'm going to hit Alt-A to deselect all the vertices, and then I'm going to hit C and drag right here, and then right click and hit G, and just drag this to match the shape a little bit better. Alright, and now we're going to repeat that process with these guys, just to match them up a little better. And the reason we're selecting this way is because it's a three-dimensional object. So you see I just clicked once right there. If you change your perspective, you can see I selected two vertices, but it appeared as though I selected one. So that's the reason I'm not just clicking on them. You're able to group select them that way. And that's probably pretty good. It does not have to be super detailed. Some of the other ones I made them a little more detailed, but this guy it's pretty simple. Alright, we're going to hit tab to get out of edit mode and scale this down on the Z-axis. That's S and then Z, and then drag towards the center of your object. Something about like that. 7 to get a top view. Alright, now we're going to pop over to the material selection, give it a new material, and hop up into the shading tab up here. And this is where we're going to give it its looks. It makes a big difference. It's crazy. You can take really basic shapes and build some really awesome stuff using this method. Let's see, we're going to go, oh, I'm sorry, back to where we started. Hold shift, hit A, and then go to texture and go up to image texture. Click right there. That should already be in here because we used it before. There we go. Hit pad. Now we can just drag this right over here, the base color. And we see we have our image applied, although it's offset and doesn't look how it should at all. But that's okay. We can pop over here into this tab, that's UV editing. And we're really only going to be viewing this mostly from the top. It's, you know, they're relatively a flat disc, and we're sticking them in water or floating on water. So you're probably not going to see underneath. We're just going to work on this top face here. So if we go up here, hit face select, and then select the top of our object, instantly we have our image pop up, and then we have our actual face here that represents that with our image. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to hit Z and change this to material preview so we can see what's going on, and hit 7 on the number pad to get a nice top-down view. Now we're going to go over here in our UV editor, hit A to select all the points, and then G to drag them and centralize the image. And we're going to hit S to scale it, like so. And like I said, from what I can tell, you're better off having a little hang over the edge with this particular thing, and it's because it has, it's a clipped object. You know, it's we're not using it in combination with any other textures, and that will just get alphaed out. It's fine. We can repeat the process that we used on this guy here to match these up, just like how they were. And bam, I'm going to hit tab. That doesn't look too bad. I'm going to hit P. Oh, nope, sorry. Over in this window, I'm going to hit A to select all the points, and then P just to pin those points. I'm going to hit tab and go back over into the shading. And take a look at it. It looks pretty good as is. So what we're going to do to get it into Unity is go to File, down to Export, and a couple of these work. Some of them are good for different things, but I like to use the FBX format. So we'll just click that. And then make sure you have, wherever you save it or whatever you save it as, make sure you have selected objects over here toggled on, because otherwise it will export your lights and your cameras and anything else you have in the scene. So you just give it a name and hit export, and it'll export it. I obviously already did all this, so I'm going to go back into Unity. Side note, if you did not export it directly into your assets folder, just hop down into your Windows Explorer and find it and drag it in there. At that point, you're going to have an object like this here. So your untextured lily pad, and then you're going to have your actual image that you used for the pad. You also need to drag that in separately. Thankfully, all the mapping that we did in Blender sticks in Unity, so it's all you need to do is reapply that material. However, an image by itself is not a material, so you need to make a new material from scratch. So you're going to right click in your assets and go up to create and then select material. A new material is going to pop up and you can rename it. This is the one I ended up making with it. It is not super complex, but the results aren't horrible for it. Let me see if I can pad. Yeah, they don't look as great as they could, but they're getting the job done, and they're floating around in the water. It's not a big deal. But the key to the material is, so you're going to make the material, name it, and then go ahead and take, we'll just do it right now. You're going to take your 3D object, drag it, and plop it out there into the world. I know there's a button for this. I can't remember what it is. And then you would just take your material and drag it, plop it right onto it, and it'll auto do the mapping. In this particular case, I've already set up the other channels for it, but I'll show you how to do that. So in the materials, you're going to select that, and then you're going to grab your image, in this case pad, drag it right up here. And you can make separate channels for these. Really, you should make separate channels for them. But I took the easy way out, and it works fine because, I mean, what are you going to do? It's not that big of a deal. We're looking at how to get the job done, not how to make it perfect. So I took the same image, tossed it onto the metallics, and then you can actually go in and affect how much that is affected. I like to think the lily pad's wet, so I got it all the way up. And then for the normal map, all I did was selected the original image, and then I hit Control, or held Control, and then hit D, and it duplicated that into pad 1. I then reselected the material, dragged that up into normal map, and then it will ask you if you want to fix its formatting. You just hit Fix. So that's why we didn't use the same image there. And obviously, if you know anything about generating the different maps, then this is not the proper way to get those different maps, but this method works fine for things like this, or at least in my opinion it does. And generating maps, that's for another video. So we brought our lily pad in, we've got it textured. Is there anything else I missed over here? That's all in the material. Obviously, from an animation standpoint, I think I explained that a little bit earlier, but just in case, I hit Control 6, go down, create new animation. We're just going to call this test, enter, hit your little record button there, adjust its position or scale or whatever you want to do. In this case, I just wanted to have them floating, so I just have them wobble up and down. So I adjust its position. Bam. A keyframe is recorded. Just going to change our time on our timeline and then adjust its position once again. And because we want this to be a looping animation, or the lily pads in the water, we wanted them to be a looping animation. You don't want to readjust that last position by hand, so what you'll do is just go over here and drag select with the left click your first keyframes. In your timeline, go to where you want your animation to end, so I just made the whole thing 2 seconds here. And then hit Control C, Control V, and bam, we have looping animation. You can click here and just hit spacebar, and it'll play the animation for us. So, I used, oh, not good. Get rid of that. I used that same method to control the clouds coming at you, as well as the motion for the camera. So the camera, if I select it, Control 6, and we gotta fix that because that's a problem. There we go. And you see it's very simple A little timeline animation there. You see the camera doing its thing. So, all in all, pretty simple. We covered the clouds. We covered the 3D objects as far as modeling, texturing, importing, mapping. Another nice thing, the new terrain system allows you to do like child terrains. This was great for having this little background, like extra mountains. This is actually 2 terrains instead of just 1. If you select your terrain object, this tool right here allows you to just click and bam, you've got a fully connected another section of terrain. It's really awesome for being able to like start small and build out, but I just used that to kind of give a little bit of a mountainous region in the background to catch the sunlight and whatnot. Alright, one last thing I wanted to cover is the lighting settings and the fog. So if you go up here to Window, down to Rendering, and select Lighting Settings, you get a whole bunch of options, but the important ones in this case are down here. Here we go. If you just toggle this on, you'll get a nice exponential square fog in your scene, and you can affect the density and coloration. And also, just to make things look a little nicer, once you get all your stuff set up, you just want to gonna want to select Generate Lighting, and all that's gonna do is bake all your lights. It's actually doing it for me right now because I added a lily pad to the scene and deleted it. But I think that just about covers it. We built terrain, we built a sky, brought in clouds, gave it sunlight, post-processing effects, depth of field, color grading, bloom, added animations to our camera, and learned how to texture and bring in objects from Blender. I'm sorry this was a little rinky-dink and that I lost the project from the first one, but I think this one turned out a little better. Let me know if this was helpful to you at all, and as always, like and subscribe. Thank you. Take it easy, guys.